Prigozhin said that the day after Victory Day, May 10th, he is going to pull out of Bakhmut if he does not get his ammunition that he wants. For those of you who don't know, the Wagner Group is a private military company that has been involved in a lot of war crimes in Ukraine. It has executed its own soldiers with sledgehammers when they have the gall to surrender to the Ukrainians and then be given back in POW swaps. They're like wife swaps, but you get your prisoners of war back. They have been involved in the beheading of Ukrainians. They have been involved in the murder of civilians, and by them being a private military company, and this is not only in Ukraine, by the way, they've been involved in war crimes in Central Africa and a bunch of different countries, Libya, Syria. They've been involved in war crimes in a lot of different countries, murder of civilians, you name it. This is in part just due to how the private military company operates. This is also in part due to the fact that they hire a lot of murderers. And when I say that, I mean that literally, as in actually going to prisons and then hiring murderers from said prisons. They hired a lot of prisoners. And I think it's also part of Russian strategy. By having the PMC, the private military company Wagner, commit these war crimes, having them execute people with sledgehammers, by having them behead people, by having them commit all these war crimes. Not that Putin himself ordered all of these war crimes. I think a lot of it just comes from the lack of discipline the private military company has. They don't get a lot of training. A lot of rapists, murderers, criminals, stuff like that is mix up their ranks. Not a big surprise. Actually, it reminds me, what was that one World War II German brigade that was originally supposed to just be full of poachers, but then eventually become one of the most notorious German brigades involved in Operation Barbarossa, and they were involved in like the slaughtering of so many different, the Duranger brigade. I don't know how to pronounce it because German's a very difficult language. I tried to take German in high school. It did not go well. Yeah, these boys, they were led by like a rapist pedophile, to be clear. Yeah, this guy, they're led by this rapist pedophile. And this time they're not led by a rapist pedophile, but they're led by a schizophrenic, and that is Prigozhin. And Prigozhin has released two statements recently, which have been absolutely bombastic. And they're probably the most aggressive statements we have seen released by Prigozhin recently. The first video, which I cannot show you, I will play the audio of and I will translate the audio, is him standing in front of about 100 dead Wagner bodies, him then blaming the Russian Ministry of Defense for those people being dead, and then requesting shells. And so we're going to go through this video first before going into the second video, which, even though it has no dead bodies, is even more bombastic because of what he says he's going to do. So I'm going to take this off screen, and you know what? I think we'll take up, do we have any good pictures of Prigozhin we can have on screen while I'm translating this? I know that a lot of guys have been like posting memes in response to the Gonzo Lira thing. Do we have any Prigozhin pointing memes from? Yeah, here we go. We'll use this as the picture on screen while we read this. Let's see. Let's read it. Let's play it. Okay, so for those of you who can't see the video, and if you want to see the video, you can find it pretty easily online, but I can't show it on Twitch. Danabo probably will edit this in post for YouTube, but he's in front of like 100 dead bodies in the middle of the night, all Wagner, just laid out. It's pretty bad. It's very bloody. It's bad. Let me translate this for you guys. Okay, so he says, these are the guys from PMC Wagner who died today. The blood is still fresh. Film all of them. Yeah, it's a lot of bodies, man. Okay, I said it was like 100. It's not that. It's probably like 30 to 40 to 50, though. But it's kind of hard to see because there's so many. They kind of like fade into the darkness. Now listen to me, you effing bitch. There are someone's fathers and someone's sons. These are someone's fathers and someone's sons. And these, I think he says the F slur, but I can't tell because they censored it. And these blanks who are not giving us ammunition, bitch, will be eating their guts in hell. Gay slur again. One second, man. He's saying a lot. So he said a gay slur, so the F slur. We have a 70% ammo deficit. That's 70%. That's high. That is high. Shoigu, Gerasimov. Shoigu is the Russian defense minister. He's a very close Putin ally. He's been kind of a punching bag for the pro-invasion military bloggers on Telegram. He seems to be the approved punching bag that Putin kind of looks the other way at. Where is the effing ammo? Look at them, bitch. You scumbags are sitting in expensive clubs. Your children enjoy live filming YouTube videos. Sorry. You think you are masters of this life, and that you have the right to control their lives. You think that if you have stockpiles of ammo, you have a right to this. The calculations are simple. If there is an ammunition norm, we get 5 times less. They came here as volunteers and are dying for you to get a free ride in your cabinets with redwood. Consider this. Then he walks off screen and they film a lot of corpses. Okay, so let's break this down. So this is a long-standing dispute between Prigozhin and Wagner and the Russian Ministry of Defense. So Wagner, and specifically Prigozhin, alleges that the Russian Ministry of Defense is not giving him as many shells as he wants or they could give him because of infighting, that they're purposefully undercutting him. This does have some weight to it. It is possible, definitely, since Prigozhin has been unbelievably critical of the military, of the Ministry of Defense, has released a ton of videos criticizing them, has had his soldiers release a ton of videos criticizing them. I think even one version, his soldiers shot pictures of Russian Ministry of Defense officials, pretty unbelievably aggressive messaging. As you can hear from this video, the messaging has never been this strong, but it hasn't been that far off. And this infighting results from the fact that many in the Russian Ministry of Defense are kind of scared by how fast Prigozhin has risen and how much he has openly been critical of them. And so they're trying to undermine him, not only undermining him by cutting out his ammo supplies, at the same time the general Russian army is having a shell hunger, which his shell problems are then justified, saying, oh, it's a shell hunger. But Prigozhin says, yes, there's a shell hunger, but we're getting screwed more than everyone else, but also by stopping Wagner from recruiting any more prisoners. Now, the Wagner PMC and Prigozhin coped about this, saying the reason they're no longer recruiting prisoners is because they recruited over 1 million Americans to fight, that they signed up online to fight after watching a Wagner recruitment ad in English. I saw the ad. It was very bad. They did not get 1,000, even 1,000 Americans. They didn't even get 10, from what I know. And plus, if you do fight for Wagner, as an American, you will go to jail. You will go to prison if you ever come back. But they didn't get all those people. It was just a lie, just propaganda. Not really good propaganda at that. But what actually happened is that the Russian Ministry of Defense is taking over the recruitment of prisoners because they saw how useful it was because of how many disposable bodies Wagner got and how much they've thrown these guys with one clip of ammo, very little training, into the front, human wave tactics to take Ukrainian trenches. That's how the Russians have made progress in Bakhmut. It isn't through the best of amazing strategies. It is, we're just going to flood the cities with as much human meat as possible, grind them down, and eventually we'll take the city. And it's been 9 months and that strategy has still yet to yield them victory in the city. They've captured about 80% of the city, maybe 75 to 80%, but 20%. And that last 20% is a very difficult portion to take because it's the high-rise part of the city. It's elevated. they still have to take that. So this is an ongoing dispute between Wagner and the Russian Ministry of Defense in this infighting. In fact, Shoigu actually started his own separate private military company, which is fighting around Avdiivka, which is another important location in the Donbass that they have failed to take, and it has been bordering Russian occupied territory for more than 8 to 9 years now. It has been built up very strong. It's like a fortress, and his PMC has been unsuccessful in getting any victories. But the idea would be that if his PMC can get a victory in Avdiivka, why Wagner can't still get a victory in Bakhmut, then he can usurp Prigozhin in the eyes of the public, and he can usurp him and show him to be useless, and then he loses a lot of his influence. This is part of the reason why there's been so much want from Prigozhin and just general Russian society as well. Prigozhin personally wants to win in Bakhmut so he can up his reputation, but the Russians also want to win in Bakhmut because it'd be a gigantic propaganda victory. Bakhmut is not that important of a city. Its main importance is as a stepping stone to other locations like, Kramatorsk, which I've been to and I filmed in before, even though I never released any of that footage. I hope to go back in the future. I'm organizing it in bed. Warpoo, thank you so much for the primer for 9 months. I appreciate it. It is now mostly a symbol. It is its main use is as a symbol of the Ukrainian resistance. They've got that song, and I heard it on the radio today while driving around. Fortress Bakhmut. Da, 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 da. I don't know all the lyrics, but you get the idea. It's on YouTube if you want to go look it up. Just look up Bakhmut song, it should come up. But this isn't the only video that Wagner released, because this next video is extremely bombastic. And I want you, while listening to this, to know that on May 9th, in like 3 days, is supposed to be Victory Day in Russia, which is the biggest holiday of the year, where they celebrate their victory over Nazism and the German Reich. And they have big parades all over the country. Well, not all over the country. Apparently 21 Victory Day parades have been canceled due to fears that the Ukrainians could attack them or bomb them or do some sabotage on them. So out of safety concerns, they've closed down 21, which is the first time they've ever done that in the history of the Victory Day parade, which does not bode well for I think in the eyes of the public. But they're still hosting it in Moscow. They're still hosting it in a bunch of other capitals. And so they're gearing up for the biggest holiday of the year, where they all kind of celebrate the pinnacle of their history, which was, defeating Nazism after enabling it through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, splitting up Poland, deporting German communists to be killed in the Holocaust, and mass deportations of Jews. But, we don't really talk about that part, just kind of sitting idly by after nation was conquered by the Nazis, and the Germans and the French were, not the Germans, but the French and the British were fighting a war. But whatever. They'd still beat the Nazis. And so this is all in the lead up to Victory Day. And Prigozhin said that the day after Victory Day, May 10th, he is going to pull out of Bakhmut if he does not get his ammunition that he wants, so his people can lick their wounds, and he's going to let his positions be taken over by the Russian Federation. This is a crazy statement. This is much further than we've ever seen him go. Much further, and could legitimately undermine the Russian war effort in Bakhmut if he's being serious, considering how much his soldiers have been the meat grinder that have led the way for the regular Russian army. Let's watch. And this has a translation, so it'll be very easy for us to consume. Wait, this is supposed to be the translated version. Okay, this is not the translated version. I think I have the translated version on my Twitter, though. So it should be very easy to find. Oh, by the way, here's some footage from my demining stuff that I filmed today. This is from a trap that was in somebody's backyard of 4 T-62M anti-tank mines that were stacked on top of each other 100 feet from a civilian home. Anyway, sorry, just thought that would be interesting. Moving on. I think I posted the English translation version. No, is there not? Did I not post English translation? Is there not an English translation version? I could have sworn there was an English translation version. There has to be. Oh, here it is. Here it is. I speak for myself, for the board of commanders of the Wagner PMC, and for the fighters of the Wagner PMC. I appeal to the NSC, the Minister of Defense, the Supreme Commander, and the people of Russia. On March 16th, when the SEA went off the rails, we were asked to help. On March 19th, 22nd, the units arrived from Africa, fully equipped, and immediately began to fight. The Wagner operates all over the world, including in Africa, the Central African Republic, Libya, etc. They fight for the warlord in Libya, Khalifa Haftar. We've entered the hardest place, the center of the Papal Fortress. And by May 9th, 22nd, they had taken the settlement. Then, in order to save the army that had fled shamefully from Izium and Lyman, this is in reference to the Kharkiv counteroffensive, where the Russian army had an extremely thin line and they broke, and the Ukrainians themselves were even impressed by how much progress and ground they were able to gain during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. They basically liberated the entirety of the Kharkiv Oblast, and it was very humiliating for the Russians as they were gearing up for the Kherson counteroffensive, which was also as equally humiliating for the Russians and led to the liberation of the only provincial capital they've captured for the entire war. We have occupied the front line for over 130 kilometers and held off the enemy onslaught. And on October 8th, 22nd, in order to give the army a respite, in order to pull all the stops, sacrificing their lives, they launched Operation Bakhmut Meat Cutter. The Bakhmut meat mill has shown success and good results. God, Jesus Christ. It's crazy how even they acknowledge that their job is just take people and just charge, everybody charge. Like, when we talk about how the Soviet Union fought in World War II, a lot of times there's a lot of exaggerations. You get one rifle, you do not. You know, it exaggerates at time, even though the Soviet commanders definitely threw away a lot of lives with a lot of the ways they fought. But Wagner unironically operates in the most stereotypical, like, Russian, we do not care about casualties way. It's just mass charge, mass charge, mass charge, and eventually maybe we'll take out one of the Ukrainians, maybe we'll get a position or two, and that's a day fighting for Wagner. It's part of the reason why they recruited prisoners. They needed a disposable population. Some of the officials, the quasi-military bureaucrats from the Ministry of Defense, were crushed by the gutter, to put it in Russian. And so we were put on what's called an artificial munition shortage, a munitions famine, referencing what we were talking about earlier. The infighting at Shoigu is terrified of Prigozhin one day taking his spot or rising above him and becoming Putin's number 2. They're lying around in warehouses. That's the other thing. Like, he's saying that there is a supply of ammunition that he could get that he's currently not getting. Again, I think there's some validity to his claims, but we don't know that for sure. But considering how they've also cut off his prisoner supply, I think his claim has some merit. We were getting no more than 30% of what we needed. So our losses were significantly higher than they should have been, but we were ahead. We stopped giving out ammo a month ago, and we're only getting 10%. We were going to take the village of Bakhmut by May 9th, 23rd. But seeing this, the pro-military bureaucrats on May 1st virtually stopped all deliveries. Dog, I'm just like... So he's saying that they were going to capture Bakhmut by Victory Day. May 9th is Victory Day in Russia. But that 4 days ago, not Putin, but like Shoigu saw this. They would never specifically indict Putin in anything. Specifically, Shoigu and the Ministry of Defense was like, oh no, they're about to have success. Let's undercut them. I do think infighting is undermining their ability to take Bakhmut, but I also am highly suspect of the idea that they were going to be able to take it by May 9th. But Shoigu makes a lot of bombastic statements, so, having some liberty about the strategic capability of his units is definitely on the list of things he would do. They're trying to stop us from doing it. So they're saying that they are so committed to Wagner not looking good in comparison to the military because of all the infighting, that they would rather Wagner not take Bakhmut in order for them to look better and him worse by comparison than them have that military victory for the Russians by Victory Day. Because they sit there, shake their fat bellies, and think they're going to make history as the victors. They're already in there with their underwear. I am hereby officially inform the Minister of Defense of the NSS, the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, to bear unarmed losses in Bakhmut, useless and unjustified. My boys will not. To bear unarmed... So from May 10th, 23rd, by the way, when he says 23rd after every, that's saying the year. 22 means 2022, 23rd, that means 2023. We're leaving the settlement of Bakhmut. That's 5 days away. 5 days. We're left to take 2 with a little mileage of 45. But if, because of your petty jealousy, you don't want to give the Russians victory in taking Bakhmut. You know what's crazy, man? Again, Bakhmut is a city of 70,000 people. Very small in the grand scheme of things. Not in it of itself that strategically important. It has extreme symbolic victory now. I mean, symbolic, meaning now, due to just all the cultural songs and art and all the references to it and how they've been fighting for 9 months. The longer it goes on, the more symbolic meaning it has. But as a strategic location, it's not that important. It's just a stepping stone. And not to mention, the city has been completely flattened. There's some footage actually that's been going around today of the Russians just hammering it with white phosphorus, which also, I don't know why, if the Russians still weren't trying to take Bakhmut, they would be hammering the city with white phosphorus, turning it into, making it look like the sun has lowered from the sky with all of its stars and has now just begun to ram itself into the city in eastern Ukraine.
Россиянам по взятию Бахмута это ваши проблемы. Поэтому
So I'm asking the NTSB to sign the order of battle. We haven't had a single piece of paper written to us in the war, because the leadership is afraid to take responsibility for both the offensive and the exit. That's true, though. That's true. So we're waiting for the order to leave Bakhmut. Oh, but what I was saying before I lost my train of thought, the Russians wanted to take Kiev in like a week. A city of 3.5 million people. They were doing VDV landings, the whole shebang, 40-mile convoy. They were never going to take Kiev. If they can't even take a city of 70,000 people, it's been 9 months, almost double the length of the Battle of Stalingrad. It's like 9 Iwo Jima battles now. If they can't take Bakhmut, then they certainly could have never taken Kiev. Oh my god. The longer Bakhmut goes on, the more ridiculous Russia's original war aims look. By the 9th, even though we're almost out of ammo, we will stay in Bakhmut so that this holy holiday for all the people of Russia does not shame the brilliance of Russian weapons. And then we'll go out to the rear camps after 400 days of daily hard labor. 400 days of combat. And in these rear camps, we will wait for the time when we will be needed by the people of Russia again. Basically, lick their wounds. I think it's about to happen. Because you're incapable of managing what you're put on. You'll see my official statement formally at the press office. Thank you all of it. Okay, so what do I think of this? First off, I don't know if this is a real threat or if this is something that's just kind of like, you know, he's beating his chest to see maybe if he beats his chest hard enough and makes a threat like this, they will give him more ammunition and help his boys out. Who knows? Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's not the case. I think there's a possibility that he is being for real. And if he is, I don't know if this could end up backfiring on him, because on one hand, I understand his logic that, look, if my boys are going to get slaughtered, if they're going to get thrown into the meat grinder, if they don't have a chance of survival, then I might as well drag them out so I don't bleed my entire organization dry and throw all these lives away pointlessly if they're not going to give me the ammunition to get the job done. And maybe I can make a show of it, maybe get the ammunition, right? But let's say he pulls out May 10th and what he's saying is true, and so they replace the Wagner guys with Russian military guys with more ammunition, and then they are able to do their job better because of the ammunition, and then they capture Bakhmut, and then it looks like Wagner was not able to capture Bakhmut for 9 months. They leave, and then the Russians capture Bakhmut in a month. And then what originally would be a message about how the Russian Ministry of Defense is undermining Wagner becomes a message about how incompetent Wagner is. They can't take a city of 70,000 in 9 months. The Russian military can take it in a month. Now, of course, Wagner is not operating alone in Bakhmut. The official Russian ministry, Russian military, is also operating Bakhmut, but they're not the ones going through the meat grinder process. So this has a possibility of backfiring on him. But that assumes that the Russians could then immediately go like, boom, I'm taking Bakhmut, and that they don't have enough ammunition problems across the board in order to run into problems, and that the Russian military can use the same strategy that Wagner can, which is just throwing all their lives away, throwing it into the meat grinder. And now you're not losing prisoners. Now you're losing Russian conscripts, official military conscripts. Now you're losing maybe some veterans, possibly some special forces. We know Spetsnaz have been used in frontline capacity, stupidly so, with some of their units taking 95% casualties because of how they've been used in frontline capacity, which is not how they're supposed to be used. But then that grinding gets thrown over to them, unless they're going to use smart infantry tactics, unless they're going to change up their strategy, which, you know, this far into the war, it's hard to imagine that the Russian military brass have any new bright ideas up their sleeves this deep into the war. This is really bad for the Russians. The more they infight, the more they fight each other as the war continues to stutter about and flip-flop around and gasp for air. The harder it's going to be for them to move forward as they're no longer operating as a cohesive military force. We're not seeing these problems in the Ukrainian military. There are some infighting in the Ukrainian military, nothing even close to what's going on with the Russians. And this is becoming one of the Ukrainians' best advantages, how much the Russians are fighting each other more than the Ukrainians. I thought all the Russian military brass were dead. Lol, having Ukrainian killed them all or not most. They have gotten better at not getting their generals killed, but early on in the war, due to just how bad the communications were, and the fact that like all the communications were getting intercepted because they were using like public radio channels a lot. And I'm talking like frontline units saying, hey, I'm going to move over here using a public channel, gets easily intercepted by Ukrainian. Literally, you could have intercepted Russian communications from your home. I, on stream during the start of the war, was playing Russian military communications on stream because it was that easy, live Russian military communications on streams, because it was that easy to intercept them that literally anybody could have done it. That situation has changed. It's gotten a little bit more coherent, and the comms are better, so they're not taking as many casualties for generals anymore. Fun times, crazy times, man. Crazy times. My goodness.